as a Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union did not want to directly confront each other. So a lot of the fighting and a lot of the tensions are going to have to take place through their allies. And the Allied system starts pretty early on in this whole conflict. As early as 1949, the United States is starting to formalize its agreements with countries through what's referred to as NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, known as NATO. There's going to be other alliances, CETO and so forth, but the first and most important in the Cold War is NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's essentially a defensive alliance that says if any of the member nations are attacked by the Soviet Union, all the nations will confront the Soviet Union. Later, when the nuclear arms race is in place, NATO is going to become essentially a missile defense shield for Western Europe and Western Germany in particular, knowing that if the Soviet Union dropped a nuclear bomb on, say, England, that the United States would retaliate with massive retaliation and use all of its nuclear weapons on the Soviet Union. That prevented any nuclear weapons from being used. In response to this, the Soviet Union is going to create the Warsaw Pact in the early 50s. Essentially, the Warsaw Pact was a way to formalize the Iron Curtain. Most of those Eastern European territories that were essentially puppet governments under the Soviet Union is going to formalize this Warsaw Pact. So we have NATO and the United States and the Soviet Union under the Warsaw Pact. These two alliances are going to be butting against each other. Another important ally of the United States is going to be Israel. Israel was a Jewish homeland created in the territory of Palestine following the events of the Holocaust. About 1 million Jewish people are going to be moving to Israel as refugees, essentially, not wanting to live in Europe, where they had essentially been targeted for extermination. And some are going to move to other countries like the United States, but Israel became a place where the Jewish population could go and feel like they had sort of security and safety. The problem was that the Jewish homeland was already occupied by the Palestinians, and Palestinians are a subsection of the Arabic population. So when the United Nations partitioned Israel out of this Palestinian territory, which had been a colony of England, there's going to be a lot of tensions between the Arabic world and the Jewish people in Israel. There's going to be several different wars in the 1950s and 60s. And over time, what's going to happen is that those Palestinian Arabic people are going to be left without land and without political sovereignty. And this is going to lead to a lot of tensions in the Middle East, which are going to lead to things like, well, we'll get into that later, but it's going to lead to a lot of tensions that are going to impact American policy in the area, as well as events in the United States later on.